That familiar sound is recognized as 4th of July, America's greatest patriotic holiday, observed not only in 50 states, but are recognized legal possessions throughout the U.S. Unfortunately, to many, it's a time for an excuse to get off work, go boating, drink alcohol, and get drunk, shoot fireworks. That's not the way it was long ago. July 4th, 1776 was marked down in our hearts, the Americans' hearts, as a sacred time when we as a united people would have to declare to England that these, and I quote Richard Henry Lee, "These united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, totally dissolved." Like no other time in our nation, so many great men were born for a just and glorious cause, the cause of liberty. Men like Washington, Franklin, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Henry, Monroe, Marshall, and the list goes on and on. God had his hand in the cause of our liberty, birthing a great people for a great event. So many Americans recognized that God was involved in their affairs. With the war impending with Great Britain, they were at prayer, seeking divine help. This attitude, voiced in the writings of the Declaration, were evident. One part says, "And for the support of this declaration, with firm reliance on divine providence, we must mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." Ask your mom and dad, or look up in the dictionary what divine providence means. It means that God loves this nation and had plans and purposes for this nation as a people, and they were seeking God for that help. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were not looking for the 4th of July as a vacation time for fun and games. By putting their names to that letter and sending it to the king, they were risking their lives, their possessions. And as Benjamin Franklin so well said after signing it, "Gentlemen, if we don't hang together, we'll hang separately." You see, little patriot, it just so happened that we won the war for independence with the divine help of God. But think for a moment, had we lost, those 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence would have been hunted down and their property taken, and they'd have been shot or hung as traitors. As it was, many lost much. Let me share some. 5 of the signers were captured by British as traitors. At least a dozen of the 56 had their homes ransacked and burned. 2 lost their sons in the Continental Army. Another 2 sons were captured. Several took part in various battles of the American Revolution, and many suffered wounds or other physical hardships. What kind of men were they? Well, 25 were lawyers or jurists. 11 were merchants. 9 were farmers of large plantations. Several were plantation owners. There were men of means and education, and yet they signed that Declaration of Independence knowing full well that the penalty could be death if they were captured. When these courageous men signed, they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor for the cause of freedom and independence for you and I today. Richard Stockton, he returned to New Jersey 2 months after signing. The state was overrun by the enemy. He quickly removed his wife to safety, but he himself was captured. His home, fine library, and writings were all destroyed. Mr. Stockton was badly treated in prison, so bad that his health was ruined, and he died before the war was over. Carter Baxton, he was a wealthy planter and trader. One of his own ships were captured by the British Navy, and he loaned large sums of money to the American cause. It was never paid back. He was forced to sell his plantation and mortgage to pay for his debts. Thomas McKeon, he was so badly hounded by the British that he had to move his family constantly. He served in the Continental Army without pay, and he kept his family in hiding. Vandals or soldiers, or both, looted properties of Ellery, Clymer, Hall, Hayward, Middleton, Harrison, Hopkins, and Livingston. At the Battle of Yorktown, the final battle, Thomas Nelson, Jr., noted that the British General Cornwallis had taken over his own personal family's home for his headquarters. Nelson urged George Washington to open fire on his own home. This was done. The home was destroyed, and Nelson later died bankrupt. Francis Lewis also had his home and property destroyed. The enemy jailed his wife for 2 months. The conditions were so bad, the hardships so difficult, that her health was affected, and she died 2 years later. Honest John Hart was driven from his wife's bedside when she was near death. Their 13 children fled for their lives. Hart's fields and his gristmill were laid waste. While eluding capture, he never knew where his bed would be from one night to the other. He often slept in the forest and caves. When he returned home, he found that his wife and children were gone. Such were the sacrifices of those that risked everything to sign the Declaration of Independence. These men were not wild-eyed, rabble-rousing ruffians. They were soft-spoken men of means and education. They had security, but they valued liberty more. It's up to you and I to take time to have the proper celebration, to remember the true meaning of the 4th of July for you and your children and the generations to come should the Lord tarry. Whenever Israel sinned and repented, they always returned to their holy days or holidays with a fresh, God-centered understanding of their responsibility before God and each other. Then God would pour out His blessing on that nation. David the psalmist said, "If the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do?" Psalm 11:3. America needs young ones like you who understand that God has given them this nation to keep His holy days holy, or the holidays holy. I've got an idea. Why don't you as a family fly your flag today? And as you place it into the holder, stand back, say the Pledge of Allegiance by your head, and pray for America. Who cares if the neighbors are watching? Perhaps you'll inspire them to do the same. God bless you this and every 4th of July.